Have you ever wondered why there never seems to be enough money at the end of the month? Imagine waking up every morning without financial worries, knowing exactly where every penny of your money is. A few months ago, I was drowning in debt and financial stress. Today, I have savings, investments, and I sleep soundly. The secret? A simple monthly budget. Stay until the end to discover how I transformed my financial life and how you can too. Let me take you back a few months. My life was a constant financial mess. Every morning I would wake up with a knot in my stomach, wondering how I was going to pay all my bills. My salary, which wasn't bad, seemed to disappear the moment it hit my bank account. I lived in a modest apartment, yet the rent felt like a heavy burden every month. My fridge was often empty by the end of the month, and I found myself juggling credit cards just to make it to the next paycheck. Going out with friends had become a source of anxiety. I was always the one saying I couldn't go or ordering the cheapest thing on the menu when I finally gave in to social pressure. My wardrobe was outdated, my car needed repairs I couldn't afford, and the idea of a vacation felt like a distant dream. The worst part was the constant feeling of failure. I watched my coworkers and friends enjoy life, buying homes, traveling, even starting families. Meanwhile, I felt trapped in an endless cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Every time I checked my bank statement, I felt a mix of confusion and despair. Where was all my money going? I knew I was earning enough to live comfortably, but somehow, I was always short. My credit card debt grew month by month and the interest was piling up, creating a financial snowball that seemed impossible to stop. I tried several times to cut back, but without a clear plan, I always fell back into my old habits. I felt trapped in a hamster wheel, running faster and faster but getting nowhere. The turning point came one cold morning. I opened my banking app to see how much money I had left for the week and my heart sank. I was in the red, and there were still 10 days until my next paycheck. As I stared at the screen of my phone, I felt a mix of panic and determination. Something had to change, and it had to change now. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly on the edge of financial disaster. That's when I remembered a conversation I had the previous week with a coworker. He had casually mentioned how he managed to save for a vacation simply by sticking to a strict monthly budget. At the time, I didn't pay much attention, but now those words echoed in my mind. Could it really be that simple? Could a monthly budget be the answer to all my financial problems? Part of me resisted the idea. After all, budgeting sounded boring, restrictive, and honestly, a bit overwhelming. How was I going to track every penny I spent? But another part of me, the part that was tired of living in constant fear, grabbed onto this idea like a lifeline. Maybe this was exactly what I needed. A plan, a structure, a way to take control of my money instead of letting my money control me. In that moment, I made a decision. I was going to learn everything I could about how to create and stick to a monthly budget. It was time to embark on a financial journey. Determined to change my situation, I started looking for resources on budgeting and personal finance. My first stop was the local library, where I found an entire section dedicated to personal finance. I borrowed several books, including The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel and Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. These books not only taught me the technical aspects of creating a budget, but also helped me understand my relationship with money. I learned about the importance of living below my means, the magic of compound interest, and how my spending habits were directly tied to my values and beliefs about money. But I knew I needed more than just theoretical knowledge. I needed practical guidance and ongoing support. That's when I discovered an online community dedicated to financial independence. There, I found a mentor, a successful financial advisor who offered free coaching sessions for beginners. My mentor, whom I'll call David, became my guide on this financial journey. In our first session, he helped me set clear and realistic financial goals. He taught me how to use free online tools to track my expenses and create an initial budget. The most valuable thing I learned from David was the importance of the right mindset. He said, "A budget isn't about restriction, it's about alignment. You're aligning your money with your values and goals." This perspective completely changed the way I viewed budgeting. David also connected me with other members of the community who were at different stages of their financial journey. Hearing their stories, challenges, and successes inspired me and gave me the confidence that I could do it too. Armed with knowledge, tools, and a support system, I felt ready to take the next step in my financial journey. With my newfound determination and the resources I had gathered, it was time to say goodbye to my old financial habits and embark on my new adventure. I sat down with all my bills, bank statements, and a blank spreadsheet. It was time to face the truth about my financial situation. For hours, I entered every source of income and every expense I could remember. Seeing all my expenses broken down was a revealing and, frankly, painful experience. I realized how much money I was spending on things I didn't really care about or need. Forgotten subscriptions, frequent takeout meals, impulsive purchases, it all added up to a significant amount. Following my mentor's advice, I divided my expenses into categories: necessities like rent and utilities, savings and investments, which until now had been an empty category, and wants, like entertainment, non-essential purchases, dining out, and so on. Then I set spending limits for each category, making sure my total expenses were less than my income. I committed to transferring the difference into a savings account at the start of each month before spending on anything else. Finally, I installed an expense tracking app on my phone and made it a goal to log every purchase, no matter how small. When I finished, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was a big change, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also felt, for the first time in a long time, a sense of hope and control over my financial future. The first few days of my new, budgeted lifestyle were exciting. I felt motivated and in control. However, it didn't take long before I started facing real challenges. The first obstacle was the simple task of tracking every expense. At first, I forgot to log small purchases like a coffee or a snack. I had to develop the habit of pulling out my phone and logging each transaction immediately. It was awkward at first, especially when I was with friends, but over a time it became second nature. Then came the challenge of resisting impulsive purchases. I'd walk by stores and see things I needed, but my budget reminded me they weren't essential. There were moments of frustration where I felt like my budget was limiting me, but I had to remind myself that this was for a greater good. One of the biggest challenges was learning to say no to social invitations that didn't fit into my budget. I had to get creative in finding ways to socialize that didn't involve spending much money, like hosting dinners at home instead of going out to expensive restaurants. I also faced the challenge of adjusting my budget. After the first month, I realized I had underestimated some expenses and overestimated others. I had to be flexible and adjust my spending categories, which was a process of trial and error. There were days when I felt discouraged. Watching my friends buy new things or go on vacations while I was counting every penny was tough. There were moments when I wanted to give up and go back to my old habits. But every time I felt tempted to quit, I looked at my bank statement. Slowly but surely, I was seeing changes. My savings account, although small, was growing. My credit card debt was shrinking. These small successes gave me the strength to keep going. Each obstacle overcome, each temptation resisted, each adjustment made to my budget made me stronger and more determined. I was learning not just about finances, but also about discipline and perseverance. I started developing strategies and systems to make budgeting more manageable and effective. First, I refined my tracking system. After trying several apps, I found one that automatically synced with my bank accounts and categorized most of my expenses. This saved me a lot of time and reduced the risk of forgetting to log transactions. I implemented the Pay Yourself First method, where, upon receiving my paycheck, I immediately transferred money into my savings and investment accounts before spending on anything else. This ensured that I was always prioritizing my long-term financial goals. I adopted the envelope method, but in a digital format. I divided my money into different virtual envelopes for different spending categories. Once an envelope was empty, I couldn't spend any more in that category until the next month. This helped me stay within the limits I had set. To manage variable expenses like electricity or heating, I started using an average of the last 3 months as a base for my budget. This helped me avoid surprises and plan better. I also set up an emergency fund for unexpected expenses. Every month, I set aside a small amount for this fund, which gave me peace of mind, knowing I had a cushion for emergencies. Finally, to stay motivated, I started celebrating small wins. Every time I stayed within my budget for a month, or paid off a debt, I marked it on my calendar and allowed myself a small reward. These strategies not only made budgeting easier to manage, but also turned it into an integral part of my daily life. It was no longer a tedious task, but a powerful tool that was helping me reach my goals. Just when I felt like I was starting to master this budgeting thing, life decided to test me. 3 months after I had started, I received a call that would change everything. My mother had been hospitalized in an emergency. Without thinking twice, I booked a last-minute flight to my hometown. At that moment, I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted to be with my family. It was only later, sitting in the hospital waiting room, when the financial reality of the situation hit me. The last-minute flight had been expensive. The hotel near the hospital, the taxis, the meals out. All these unexpected expenses were wrecking the carefully planned budget I had worked on for months. For a moment, I felt like all my progress was falling apart. The voice of doubt began whispering in my mind. See, budgets don't work in real life. There will always be something to ruin them. While my mother was recovering in the hospital, I struggled with a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I was grateful to be there for my family. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel anxious about the financial impact of this emergency. One night, exhausted and stressed, I opened my budgeting app. I looked at the red numbers and felt a wave of discouragement. Had it all been in vain? Should I just give up and go back to my old habits? It was in that moment of crisis when I remembered something my mentor had told me. A budget isn't a straitjacket. It's a flexible plan that helps you manage the unexpected. I took a deep breath and decided that this crisis wasn't going to define my financial journey. It was time to test everything I had learned and find a way to overcome this challenge. In the midst of the crisis, I realized that I had been building something without even knowing it. First, I reviewed my emergency fund. Although it was still modest, I had enough to cover a good part of the unexpected expenses. This small cushion, which I had been steadily building over the last 3 months, was now proving its worth. Then, I looked at my budget with fresh eyes. Instead of seeing it as a rigid plan that had failed, I saw it as a flexible tool that I could adapt to my current circumstances. I began making adjustments, reallocating funds from less essential categories to this emergency. I realized that thanks to my new conscious spending habits, I had more wiggle room than I thought. The subscriptions I had canceled, the meals out I had reduced, the impulse purchases I had avoided, all of that was now adding up to a significant amount that I could redirect toward this urgent situation. In addition, I discovered that I had options I wouldn't have considered before. I called my credit card company and negotiated a lower interest rate. I also spoke with the hospital about payment plans, something that would have scared me too much to even try before. But the real treasure went beyond the numbers. It was the peace of mind that came with knowing I could handle this situation without spiraling into debt. It was the confidence of knowing that I had the tools and knowledge to navigate financial storms. As my mother recovered, I realized I had uncovered something invaluable. Financial freedom isn't just about having a lot of money, but about having control and flexibility to manage whatever life throws at you. This treasure of financial resilience and peace of mind was something no amount of impulse purchases or careless spending could ever match. It was a gift I was giving myself, one day at a time, with every conscious financial decision I made. After the storm came the calm, and with it, the opportunity to assess the results of my financial journey up to that point. Despite the unexpected crisis, I was surprised to discover that not only had I managed to stay afloat, but I had even made significant progress. My credit card debt, which had once seemed like an insurmountable mountain, had been reduced considerably. My emergency fund, though diminished by recent events, was still there, something that would not have been possible months ago. These results showed me that I was on the right track. The budget wasn't a magical solution that fixed all my problems overnight, but it was a tool that was helping me build a solid foundation for my financial future. 6 months after starting my journey, it was time to return to my normal life, but with a new perspective and a set of financial skills that had transformed my relationship with money. The first thing I noticed was how my daily routine had changed. Checking my budget and tracking my expenses had become as natural a part of my day as brushing my teeth. It was no longer a tedious task, but a habit that gave me a sense of control and purpose. My social environment had also experienced subtle but significant changes. My friends and family had noticed my new attitude toward money. Some even asked me for advice on how to start their own budgets. I found myself sharing what I had learned, feeling a sense of pride in how far I had come. Reflecting on my 6-month journey, I realized I had arrived at an important conclusion. Financial success isn't about how much you earn, but about how you manage what you have. That's why it's crucial for you to learn how you can get out of debt with the snowball method, which is surprisingly effective and easy to implement. In this video, I'll guide you step by step through this method that led me to financial success.